So today we are going to be learning about something called density. Does anybody have any ideas at all what density is? Just off the top of their head, you can say anything or anything you think it might be. So density, or what do you think maybe density relates to? Anybody have any ideas? Or if not, you can just say you're not sure.
Real quick, Lauren, we have a question. Do we need food coloring for this?
So I mean, in order to create, so what we're going to be doing today, I should say, we're creating kind of a density rainbow. So if you want to create the effect of the rainbow and kind of have those colors and make it look like a rainbow, then you do need food coloring. However, to see the density, like the effects of density and what it does, you don't need food coloring. So the food coloring is mainly just if you want to see and get those pretty colors in the experiment, but you'll still be able to learn about density and what it is and what it does if you don't have the food coloring. Okay. All right, so density is basically, you can kind of think it's related to weight or how heavy something is. So the technical term is its mass per unit volume. So you can think it's almost how heavy something is or how compact something is. So if or for an object to have a higher density, you want it to be, so for example, my coffee cup. It's pretty heavy, it's got lots of mass and weight to it versus something, let's say, like a roll of tape. This is filled with air, it's really light. You could also think of something, for example, if you take water. So if something were to sink in water, then that object could be thought of as having kind of a higher density, or it could be heavier. Whereas if something can float on water, so sometimes like a paper clip or anything like that, or a styrofoam cup, for example, that stuff would have a bit of lower density and it would weigh less. So what I'm going to do really quickly here, I'm going to kind of show a bit of how density works. I have a big bag of marbles. This isn't part of the actual experiment. This is just kind of a demo that I wanted to do for you guys. I have two small containers. They're exactly the same size. Open, no lid. So what I'm going to do, I'll tilt this down a little bit for you guys so that you can see what's going on. So I have both my two containers here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, let's just say, maybe 5 or 6 marbles. I'm going to put 5 or 6 into one. You can see there's not very many. And then I'm going to put a big handful. I'm not even going to bother counting. And I'm going to put a lot of marbles. I know this might be a little loud. I'm going to put a lot of marbles into the other container. So off the top of your heads, which one do you think is going to be heavier? Number 1 or number 2? Or which one do you think is going to be more dense? Anybody have any ideas? Yep, so I've seen one person has said 2. So you guys are on the right track. So 2 is a lot heavier than 1. And you can almost think of the marbles as acting as molecules, so molecules in a substance. So these marbles represent the molecules that would be in an object, for example. So what I was saying before about how an object with a higher density is going to be, it's going to weigh a little bit more, it's going to be more compact. So you can see here, all the marbles are pretty tightly they're all on top of each other. There's not too much, I mean, there's a little bit of space between here, but they're all as compact as they can be. They've squeezed into the space that they can, like that, versus you've got this container over here that's not very compact. The molecules are kind of rolling around. They can do whatever they want. They can move wherever they go, and there's not much. It's super, super light, whereas this one, if I tilt it up and down like I did with the other one, especially these bottom marbles, aren't moving anywhere. So this one's pretty compact and heavy, and this one's lighter. Another thing to note too, and you'll see this today, so this will be something that you'll observe. We're going to be using liquids though to see the density effect. But if I take my heavier, so I have my heavier container, I guess, right here, and if I take a lighter one and if I put it on top of the heavier one, see how it rests on top? So it doesn't sink in, it rests on top, it's sitting on that upper layer, or on this layer here. because this one is more dense, it's more compact, so these guys, or this container, all these molecules are not able to sink in between. But even if I try and push down, I can't really get this lighter container to go in. But if I went the other way around, if I put this lighter container on the bottom, or the object that's less dense, we would say, and if I take our heavier container here, or the object that's more dense, and I put it over top, you guys can see how it sinks in, right? So this container, this object is now sinking into the one, since this guy up here, our heavier container, is more dense, and this guy is less dense, so these molecules are not as compact, and this heavier, or this object with heavier density, is able to get into that. So that's just kind of a little thing I thought I would show you guys, and you will see how that relates to the liquids that we're going to be using and how the liquids have certain density. So what I have here, I will show you guys. I've got honey, I have dish soap, I have, you can't see it, but this is just a cup full of water, so this is just water right here. I have some olive oil, and then I also have some rubbing alcohol, or isopropyl alcohol. So what we're going to do today is we're going to create a density jar. So we're basically going to be starting our jar, or our glass. I just have a tall glass here, but you can use a jar as well, any type of big jar. And we are going to be layering all these objects, or all these liquids right here. And we're going to go from heaviest, or the one that is the most dense, and we're going to work our way up to the liquid that is the least dense, or that is the lightest, I guess you could say. So you will need some type of maybe rubbing alcohol or isopropyl alcohol for the last step. If you don't have it right now, though, that's okay. Like I said, you can come back and do the experiment later. Anyway, which object, I guess I would say, do you guys think is going to be the heaviest? Which one do you think we're going to put on the bottom of our jar? Any ideas? So I'll show you guys again here. We have the honey, the dish soap, the water, the olive oil, and the rubbing alcohol. Which one do you guys think is going to be the heaviest, or the most dense? So you can think about the properties of all these objects right here. Think about how they move. So it's not going to be dish soap. Anybody else have any ideas here? Yes, I saw one person. So it's going to be the honey. So the honey in this case, that's going to be the one that's going on the bottom, since that, I guess you could say it's the most dense, for example. So what just for kind of a side note, honey is composed, it has mostly sugars, a little bit of water, and kind of carbohydrates or carbs in them, but this is mostly sugars. So we'll see how that maybe comes into play here. So what we're going to do, if you do have honey on hand, I kind of pre-poured this into a little glass, but I put my honey into here so that then, because we're going to add some food coloring to it, and we're going to make it a purplish color. So this is where if you don't have any food coloring, it's okay. You'll still be able to see how the layers and how density works. But if you want to make that rainbow color, then we're going to be dyeing the honey a purple color. So what you're going to do, I put my honey just into kind of a glass jar here. You're not going to need too much. I mean, it depends on what type of glass you have. So I have kind of just a medium size, taller glass, whereas if you had a bigger jar, you might want some more. So what we're going to take to our honey, though, I have my food coloring here, and we're going to get out the colors red, and we're going to get some blue. And all you're going to do, you're going to add 1 or 2 drops of each color. So I take my blue here, and I've got my stirring spoon. I'm going to add 1 drop of blue, and then we're going to take our red, and again, just 1 drop in my case, but you can add 2 if you like, or 2 drops of each. And then we are just going to stir it up. It might take a few seconds to really get those colors mixed in together. You want to stir it up as much as possible. Make sure that all the honey gets dyed that purpley color, and that those red and blue colors mix in. So you can see here, I will show you guys. You can kind of see it almost maybe looks kind of like a black, but it is a purple color. So my honey is pretty thick, since it is a little bit older, so you can kind of see how honey tends to do that weird effect once you've opened it, and it gets all weird and clumpy. So you might have to maybe even take your honey and microwave it for a few seconds if it's like that. But if not, that is okay. So what we're going to do next, once you've got your honey, you've stirred it up, you've got those colors in, I would suggest keeping, so I have a few stirring spoons, so you are going to need a few since we're going to be dyeing obviously some other things later, and I'm not going to want to use the same spoon that I did for my honey for my other ones, because this one is, you can tell, a little bit covered in honey and gross. So what we're going to do next is, from that little glass that we were mixing our honey in, I'm going to take my tall jar, and what I'm going to do, and you don't want to pour it down the side, so in this case we're going to want to try and pour it just straight into the middle. We don't want anything running down the side, because then honey will be stuck to the side of our jar, and that might kind of make things a little bit wonky, especially when we are trying to mix the colors or create those different layered colors. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my spoon, and I'm basically, I hope you guys can see this here, just going to really slowly let the honey drop into the very bottom or middle of the glass. So like I said, you don't need too much. I'm just going to use all the honey that I have here anyway, which might have been a lot in this case, but that's okay. All right, there we go. So you guys can see here, I've got a little bit more left. Let's just use it all. And like I said, just a reminder, try and get it into the middle of this glass as much as you can, so we don't have any weird lines down our glass. All right, there we go. Okay, so you guys can see now I've got my purple honey color on the bottom of this jar, or this glass that I have here. So it's a nice purple color. If yours is not a purple color, if you don't have food coloring, that's okay. You can still see it coat the bottom. So what do we think is going to be the next object or liquid that we are going to be putting into our cup today? So remember, we've got water, we have oil, we have rubbing alcohol, and we have dish soap. So those four things, what do we think is going to be the next one that's going to be added to our glass here? Any ideas? That's okay if yours is more of a brown color. You can try adding maybe some more red to try and get it maybe a bit more of a purple instead of the brown, but that's okay. And yes, I did see it. So we're going to be adding dish soap. So in this case, I have green dish soap, but if some of you have blue dish soap, that works too. But in my case, so I should explain this, since I have green dish soap, the next two layers of my, let's say, rainbow are going to be a little bit lopsided, since normally, you know, it goes from purple and then blue and then green, but in my case, since I have green dish soap, my rainbow is going to go purple, green, and then blue. So if you do have green dish soap, it's fine. We might just have a little bit of a lopsided rainbow in the one part, but that's totally okay. If you have blue dish soap, then that's great. So what we're going to do, since our dish soap is already colored in a sense, we're not going to need to add any food coloring whatsoever to these guys. And we're just going to add it straight to our glass. And once again, do you guys think we're going to be adding it down the side of our glass, or do you think we're going to be adding it just straight in and not down the side? What do you guys think? You might need a paper towel as well. I got some honey on me, and that's okay. What do we think? Do you think we're going to go straight in the glass like we did with the honey, or are we going to go down the side? That's okay if your honey is a little bit, oh, you have orange dish soap. That's okay too. Like I said, might be a little bit of a more lopsided rainbow, but it is totally fine. It works. It'll still be pretty in the end. All right, so we are going to be adding our dish soap straight into the middle of the glass like we did with the honey, because same thing, we don't want it going down the sides and making any marks and maybe mixing in with the next liquids and substances that we're going to be adding. So in this case, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it, I guess maybe I'll use that term, like I did with the honey. So we aren't going to be measuring out anything specific, but you do want to make sure maybe that your layers are kind of a similar size. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to take this dish soap and carefully, again, nice and slow, no rush here, I'm going to carefully just lightly start pouring it. And you can already kind of see that that dish soap will disperse on the top of the honey. Let me see if I can bring this carefully closer to you guys and show you. But my honey, you can already kind of tell, is creating its own layer, sitting on top of the honey, and it's not mixing in with the honey. So I might add a bit more just to show the effect, but there you have it, just like that. So kind of cool. So you'll see it whether you have orange dish soap or blue dish soap or green dish soap. You should see this effect, which is really, really cool. So not to worry if it's not following the exact order of the color of the rainbows. So this, if you guys think back to this marble and container kind of model or demonstration that I did here. So in this case, this would be the honey, right? And you've got this being the oil, or pardon me, the oil, the dish soap. And that dish soap is going to sit right on top of the honey. It's not going to mix in with the honey. It's not going to blend in. It's not going to sink in like this. It's going to sit on top. So that kind of goes to show, that's our first example here of how density can separate substances or liquids, because our honey here is sitting on the bottom and our dish soap is sitting on the top and they're not mixing. So obviously our dish soap is going to be lighter or less dense than our honey. So, yep, so we're going to be creating that rainbow color. So does anybody know what we're going to be adding next? So now we have water, we have oil, and we have rubbing alcohol left. So just 3 more things, water and oil, and we have some alcohol, or rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, whatever you want to call it. Anybody have any ideas what we're going to add next? What do you guys think? We are going to need some food coloring for this one next, though. So not oil. What do we think is maybe less dense, or pardon me, more dense than oil? Not the alcohol. So the other one, other than the alcohol and the oil, is our water. So we are going to be adding our water next. So this is, I'll show you guys, I'm going to pour it into just, I have a spare glass here since we're going to be adding some food coloring, and this might be a bit easier to show you guys. So I'm just going to pour my water here into this glass. This is water. I don't want to tilt it too much here, but just plain old water, tap water. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to take my blue food coloring, since like I was saying before, how to try and get, you know, a bit of a rainbow look to it. We're going to go with blue next. So I'm going to take my food coloring and just adding a couple drops again. And I do have a separate stir spoon here because I don't want to be using the same spoon I had for the honey. So we're going to take our blue food coloring and make sure we are being careful with this food coloring since it does stain your clothes pretty easily. So we want to be as careful as we can with this. So I'm just going to take my food coloring, I'm going to add maybe 2 drops, maybe 3 today just for fun. Why not? All right, and I'm going to give this a stir so you can kind of, I don't know if you can see that, oh darn, but the food coloring is kind of mixing, it's going to sink to the bottom, and then once we stir it up though, and get it all mixed in with our water, it should be a nice blue. And you guys will be able, maybe I can show you on the spoon, just like that. It's a nice blue color. What I was going for, but all right. Next thing again, so I would use maybe colder water, since hot water, there is another type of kind of experiment that I saw where you can test out the difference between hot and cold water in their densities, but I would go cold water today because hot water is a little bit different in its density than cold water. So to keep things nice and simple, we're going to go with colder water. It doesn't have to be ice cold or anything like that, but just nice and cold. Yep, so once you've got your blue water, so you can even kind of tell here now, mine's nice and dyed, we are going to be adding it to our glass. And once again, do we think that we are going to add it straight into the middle of our glass, or are we going to go down the side? What do you guys think? Anybody have any ideas? So we're going to do the same thing that we did. same thing that we did before. We're going to pour the water straight into the middle of our glass here. So I do have a lot of water sitting in this cup, so I'm not going to be using probably all of this water, but that's okay. All right. Okay, so really carefully, like I said again, just pouring nice and simple into the middle here. Now this one might kind of mix together at first, but it should separate after that. So I'm just going to let mine separate here. So I maybe could have added a little bit more blue, just because the blue is a little bit lighter, and I kind of forgot about how dark green my dish soap is, but you can still see the distinction here. I'll add the last bit of water, and then might be a little bit clearer here. So you might even get some bubbles that pop up when you mix your water and your soap together. That's okay. But if you guys, right, I'll let it still kind of settling in. But you should be able to, at least maybe I'll turn it a bit. We have our green layer here, and then in my case, I have my blue layer of water right here. So like I said, you might be able to see that at first, when you poured the water in, it kind of got some bubbles, and that water kind of was mixing in with the oil, or pardon me, the dish soap. But once you kind of let it settle, all that water should rise up above that dish soap, and you should get a clear layer. So now I'm seeing a clear definition in my green and blue water, but at first it was a little bit hard to tell since they were mixing in a bit and my water wasn't maybe as blue as I should have done it. Yep, so if you have everything in the right order, it can look like a rainbow, but like I said, if you've got a little bit of different colored dish soap, then that might affect how much your jar looks like a rainbow, but that's okay. Either way, there's going to be lots of cool colors that we're going to mix in together, and it'll look super cool in the end, not to worry. So now we've got 3 layers here, and we only have 2 liquids left. We have our oil and our rubbing alcohol. Which one do we think we're going to add next? So I've seen one, or which one I should add, which one do we think is going to be more dense or heavier? So I see it here, oil. You guys are right, we are going to add the oil next. And to answer the question, you don't need blue dish soap, but just because the order of our liquids here and because of the density, if you were to have blue dish soap, I should have mentioned this, so you'd have purple and then blue. And then what we could do with our water is that we could make that a green color. So then it would be purple, blue, and green. So if I had my blue dish soap here, then my water, I would turn it into a green color. So I would be adding, you'd kind of have to mix your food coloring around a little bit. So that's what I would do if I had blue dish soap. I know somebody said they have orange dish soap. So in this case, you could either, your water could be blue, or you could make it a green color in that case, because orange could go either. You can either add the blue water, or you can add kind of green colored water. So you can add whatever colors you want. You can kind of make it your own if you like. And that's okay, we're not done yet. So by the end of it, it'll look pretty sick. So our oil, we're going for a bit of a yellow color. And as you guys know, whether it's vegetable oil or I have extra virgin olive oil, not a big deal, just any type of oil. It's kind of already got a yellowy tinge, a yellowy color to it. So I'm not going to add any food coloring in, but I guess if you really wanted, you could probably take your oil and put it in kind of a little jar, a little extra cup, and add some yellow food coloring to it, and make it work. I mean, I have yellow food coloring here, but today I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to add the oil straight in. So you can watch too. Here, I'll try and maybe hold it up and pour it at the same time so you guys can see what's going to happen. So I'm going to add this straight into, like we've done with all the other liquids or substances so far. I'm going to add it straight into the glass. I'm not going to add it down the side. So let's see what happens here. Everything's kind of mixing together. And I'm going to let it separate. I want to pour it in nice and slow. And it'll probably form a nice bubbly layer. So nice and slow. adding it in. I made a bit of a mess here, but that's okay. All right. So you can kind of see on the top here, it's almost forming this like bubbly, cool layer. But you can definitely see it sitting on top. If you pour it in too heavy, or if you kind of just go for it, that dish soap and the water. So you know, before we have dish soap, and then we have water, and then we added our oil. So if those two mix together, then or if your oil kind of, I'll say, goes too deep, if you pour it too hard, then you might get your dish soap and your water and your oil kind of all mixing together to form. So you can kind of see that almost on the top here, which happened to me, which is okay, still forms, and you can still see it's not maybe as visible here, but there is still this layer of dish soap on the bottom that I have here, and then my water, and then I've got my olive oil on top. So last but not least, we have our rubbing alcohol. And I would suggest actually to you guys maybe do a bit of a thicker layer of oil, just because the rubbing alcohol that we're going to be adding next, it's kind of, if we don't have a thick layer of oil, then it might mix in with everything and our colors might get kind of intertwined. So I'm going to add maybe a bit more olive oil just so that I can show you guys. It's kind of doing some funky things here, but that's okay. So I've got my nice thick layer of olive oil. Yep, so you guys are right. We have our rubbing alcohol left, or isopropyl alcohol, whatever you want to call it. So that is going to be what we add next. So I have another cup here. I probably should have gotten clear cups to show you guys a little bit better, but this is what I had on hand. So I'm going to take kind of an extra little cup, and I'm going to add a little bit of the alcohol in. So I'll show you guys here. Let's see if it. So we don't need too much. I don't know if you can start to see that alcohol kind of in my cup, but not too much. Maybe the bottom part, maybe a bit more. Who knows? You can kind of. This is where you can make your rainbow your own. You can kind of mix it up a little bit. So what we're gonna do now is try and make it as rainbowy as possible. You guys are right. We're gonna take our red food coloring. So this is where, what I mean by you could mix it up is if you wanted to kind of take the food coloring, and if you wanted to dye all these substances a different color, if you wanted to make your honey green, and if you wanted to make your olive oil red or something like that, you could probably do it. You could probably play around with it and make it some cool, interesting, fun colors and a totally different type of rainbow. But for today, I'm going to try and follow what a rainbow should kind of look like. I'm going to take my red food coloring now, and I'm going to add, let's say, 4 drops maybe, just for fun. Make it a super red as we can go. And I'm going to take, I do have another stirring spoon, but in this case, you could probably use the same one you used for your water. So what I'm going to do is stir that up. You can make it as red as you want here. Mine's a little bit pinky. I might even add one more. So you guys might be able to tell the isopropyl alcohol, at least in my case. It does smell kind of strong. So we definitely don't want to be sitting right over our cup and breathing in the alcohol. So you want to make sure that you keep the cup or the alcohol a little bit far away from you. You don't want to be right over top breathing in everything from that. So I'm going to hold it a little bit in front of me here. I'm going to stir it up. And if you need mom or dad or your parents' help, definitely do get it. All right, so next, I know we have been adding everything in right now. We've been adding it straight into the middle of our jar here, but we're going to mix it up right now, and we are going to try and add it down the side of our glass, in this case to limit the amount that our alcohol is kind of like plunging in here to the center of this and mixing in with all of these liquids that we have. So what I'm going to do is really, really carefully, I'm just going to tilt my glass slowly. And all I'm going to do, I might even take, I have a bit of like a skewer here. So this is just going to help make sure that the in my case, I'll show you guys actually, that the liquid goes straight down from the cup and it just follows kind of this, I guess this little stick that I have, maybe that's a better way of putting it. And it doesn't go all over the place, since, you know, sometimes if you pour something really slowly, you can tell how when you go to pour the water comes back down and it will fall down the bottom of the glass. But in this case, hopefully what will happen is it'll follow this stick and it'll just go straight out. So it won't kind of fall down here. So we'll test it out. Let's see how this works, or see how it goes. So I'm going to tilt my glass ever so slightly to the side there, and I'm going to take my isopropyl alcohol and I'm going to slowly pour it down the side. So maybe I'll try and get a little closer here so you guys can see. Nice and slow. You can see how it's already starting to sit on top of the olive oil. So this, you don't need this kind of stick or skewer or anything like that. You can even use just like the back of your spoon if you want, to help you out. Let's see here. So you can definitely tell on the one end, that's kind of good to note, on the one end, right, let's see if I can turn it, my isopropyl alcohol you can kind of see is starting or trying to mix in with that oil layer beneath us. But what you will see, once you let it sit, in my case I saw some pretty weird bubbles, but it's really cool because once I let it sit, you can see the extremely distinct layers between, where are we? There we go. So I have my isopropyl alcohol sitting on top. I have a layer of my oil right there, and then I kind of have these bubbles almost that are at the bottom layer of that oil. So that's just because of probably mostly the alcohol did interact with it a little bit. But overall, if you look at it from the side, it is a super cool, that alcohol is just sitting right on top of the oil. It's almost like jello. If you kind of tilt it really slowly, kind of side to side, you can see it's just sitting there, it's just wobbling on top. It's not even interacting whatsoever. And that, my friends, is our super cool, pretty awesome density rainbow jar. So same thing again, I should mention maybe with our alcohol and our oil, really similar to our little container experiment. This would be our alcohol, this would be our oil. That alcohol is just sitting right on top of the oil. It's not even mixing in at all because our alcohol is less dense. So it's lighter maybe than our oil. Our oil is heavier, it's more dense, it's more compact. It's got, maybe you could even say, just more molecules per space that we have. So for this space, that oil has more molecules and more compact. So it's not letting that alcohol kind of sink in and mix in with it. I hope, so this is where you guys might have, or might look a bit different depending on the color of dish soap that you used, or even just the color that you dyed your water, or even your rubbing alcohol or your isopropyl alcohol. Whatever color you dyed it, it might make it look a bit different. But in my case, these are my results. So you guys might have, like I said, something different. Don't worry about that. And if you didn't follow, or if you just were following along today, like I said, we are recording this. So you can go back afterwards and follow along with what I did in case you forgot. But that kind of concludes our experiment today, guys. I hope you guys got some pretty cool results, or I hope you think it's pretty cool. I sure do. And if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask. I'll be here for another maybe 5 minutes or so. So any questions that you guys have at all, feel free to send them in the chat, and I would be happy to answer them.